Well, it's my pleasure to be back at ISU helping to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Political Science Department and to honor the Pi Sigma Alpha inductees. At Luther College, we like to talk about how Luther education transforms lives. This is partly a marketing strategy for a place that charges $38,000 a year. A big investment should produce a big return. Transformation sounds better than we will change you a little bit. Still, I think transformation is an exaggeration. For both the cause, the Luther experience, and the effect, a big change of what happens to most of our students during their 4 years. Humans are rarely transformed in such a short time span. But sometimes it does happen, and it happened to me here at ISU. In January 1977, I was teaching social studies to 6th and 7th grade students in Burlington, Iowa. I was a pretty ordinary middle school teacher who was restless to do something else. A colleague who had taught across the hall from me a couple of years earlier had gone off to graduate school to study political science. I had always enjoyed reading about politics and had even run unsuccessfully for the Burlington School Board a year earlier. Maybe I should study politics, I thought. But there were at least two big obstacles. I had failed civics in high school, and I had just barely graduated from St. Ambrose College a few years earlier with a major in sociology. What political science graduate program would want me? In the spring of 1977, I took the GREs and discovered I was smarter, at least according to this measure, than I thought I was. Still, there were those high school and college transcripts. To my amazement, I had made a favorable enough impression on one of my sociology professors at St. Ambrose that he was willing to write a letter of recommendation. So I resigned my position at St. John's in Burlington and applied to the decade-old political science program at ISU. It might not surprise you to hear that the Graduate Student Selection Committee did not immediately see the wisdom in offering me a place or assistantship. By May, I was getting desperate, and so I got in my almost paid-off Ford Mustang II and drove to Ames to meet with the then Director of Graduate Studies, Bob Wessel, to make my case. About a week later, I received an acceptance letter and an offer of an assistantship. It seemed several accepted students had decided to go elsewhere, and maybe Wessel saw something in me. In any case, I was now a graduate student and a little clueless about what I had gotten myself into. I had no plan beyond not failing. Biologist Patrick Bateson writes, quote, "Every individual is built with the capacity to develop in a number of distinctly different ways. The true road to success lies not in the person's molecular structure, but in his developing the most productive attitudes and identifying magnificent external resources." End quote. I recently attended a high school and college reunions, and I dare say no one who had lost touch with me would have predicted that I would become a college professor. Indeed, my mother, who was 89, still can't believe it. This is where my ISU mentors come into the story. And I apologize for how long it took to get to them. Jim McCormick taught me a systematic way to think about American foreign policy and graciously let me win on the tennis court, something I desperately needed in those anxious days. Jerry Shakeshaft taught me Marx and Hegel, and once when I went to his office to ask a question, started throwing books at me in the hope, I suppose, that I would pick up some of his passion for political philosophy. Shakeshaft encouraged argument between professor and student, and I came away from his classes feeling not only relief that I had gotten away alive, but also a kind of gradual dawning that I had ideas worth rebutting. In a word, he took ideas seriously, and that notion flipped a switch for me. Because of my interest in American politics and public policy, I took many classes from Don Hadberger and Ross Keller. The two of them guided my work on a master's paper. I would also serve as Hadberger's research assistant for several semesters, including the summer interviewing members of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. I'll never forget the first test I took from Professor Keller. He would give us 4 big essay questions the week before the exam and select 2 for us to write on the day of the exam. It is early morning hours before the first gallery exam. I'm living in the little dorm room in Buchanan Hall, which, by the way, is really grown. It's an existential moment for me. Questions are there, either I prepare or I don't. And if I don't, I will disappoint this gentle and rigorous man. I can't disappoint him, and so I study. And once I apply myself and see the results, all of a sudden it dawns on me, I can transform myself by working hard. And after a while, a habit forms, and I grow to like the feeling of mastery. And no longer do I do it for Professor Talbot, but for myself. I grew closest to Don Hadberger while at ISU. I took my very first graduate course, The American Presidency, from Hadwiger. He had an easygoing manner in the classroom that masked a fierce intelligence and commitment. Hadwiger taught me to pay attention to patterns that can be measured in the world when he sent me to the library to map out the increase in articles about the environment after the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Every time I read about an increase in this or a decrease in that, I think why? And that why came from Hadwiger. But what I most remember about Professor Hadwiger is how well he listened. I last saw him about a decade before he died at Chicago's O'Hare Airport after a political science conference. We had lost touch over the years, and I wanted to tell him about my most recent project. As we walked through O'Hare while waiting for our planes, he listened to me prattle on like he had always done. Then he gently offered a suggestion or two. So here I am, giving this little talk today at an event honoring the department that set me on a distinct path to teach a subject I failed in high school at a school that would not have admitted me as an undergraduate. If that is not a transformation, I don't know what is.